A report came out on Monday that indicated the New York Mets are in on Trea Turner this offseason. What could that look like next year? How does he fit positionally? How much money could he make? What would that mean for Brandon Nimmo? We're going to discuss all of that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, the Mets are reportedly in on Trea Turner, and we know this because of a report from Mike Mayer, who, if you're not following yet on Twitter, you absolutely have to. One of the best sources of Mets information, puts out great stats, has great sourcing. I worked with him over at Metsmerize, so definitely give Mike Mayer a follow at MikeMayer22. He tweets this out today. It says, buzz over the last 24 hours has been that the Mets really like Trea Turner and could make a run at the offensive weapon. Adding a player like Turner would give the Mets a ton of versatility offensively and defensively. So the Mets are all in on Trea Turner apparently. And look, this is not something we should take lightly. Last offseason, what do we hear? Mets are interested in Max Scherzer. I laughed it off. I said, no way. We thought that Scherzer would want to play for the Dodgers again, or would just not want to go to a team that was his rival for all these years. Here we go again, where there's a report about a former National that the Mets are in on. And I will say there was also something that surfaced, an old interview from this season that said a couple of things that Trea Turner had illustrated that he has a little bit of interest in the Mets. And the two questions he answered is what ballpark or road ballpark do you like playing in most? He said New York, and he did mention the fans, the environment at Citi Field. He also said he wanted to play with Jacob deGrom. Now, he said that because he doesn't want to face Jacob deGrom anymore, and we have no idea if deGrom will be a Met, but I don't think there's anything that is prohibiting Turner from signing with the Mets. Seems like he would like to move back over to the East Coast. And I think the only thing would potentially be if he wants to stay at the shortstop position, because we know he's not going to do that with Lindor. But money talks and winning talks, and East Coast could talk, and a ballpark that he likes could be a motivating factor. And ultimately, if he's going to sign a contract that pays him north of $30 million a year potentially, I think he'll be okay maybe moving off the shortstop position. So, what does this mean and what can this guy provide? Well, we'll go through the fit in the next segment positionally and then the contract to close out the show. But, I mean, this is an interesting potential move for the Mets. And you look at what this guy has done. And since 2018, games played, 162, 2019, 122, plus being healthy for that whole playoff run to win a World Series. 59 games out of 60 in 2020, 148 games played last year between two teams, and 160 games played this year. So when it comes to durability, you're liking Trea Turner more than Brandon Nimmo, and a lot of this is what we sort of have to do here because it's the idea that the Mets' one move to upgrade themselves this offseason would be to go from Nimmo to Turner. And I think if we're just looking at the offensive fit, because that's the easiest way to dissect this now, we'll get into the defense later, it is clearly an upgrade. As much as I love Brandon Nimmo, and I can point to WRC+, which is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. So that's supposed to be this all-encompassing metric that tells us how good a player is. For their careers, you have Nimmo at a 134 WRC+, you have Turner at 124. The difference is Nimmo's been hurt, hasn't been able to stay on the field as much. You have Brandon Nimmo at 608 games played across his career, not even at 2,500 plate appearances yet. You got Turner at 849 games played, and he's at 3,737 plate appearances. So he has more time to put up some bad results mixed in there, some hot and cold streaks. And also, I mean, you look at home runs for Turner. Obviously more games played, but 124, he basically doubles the 63 that you've gotten from Nimmo. Stolen bases is not even a conversation. He's been the best stolen base threat in baseball since he debuted, 230 bags stolen since then. So he'd bring an entire different dynamic than this Mets team has had. An ability to score a lot of runs, to drive in runs. They just put out a hype video today, his agent did, on Trea Turner's free agency with Jon Hamm narrating. It was a fantastic watch. Obviously, they're hyping him up just like when there was that whole book that came out, Yoenis Cespedes, before his free agency. So, not to take too much from that, but to just look at the player he's been, the fact that he strikes out less than 20% of the time, has ever since his rookie year. That just shows you what a good at bat he is. 18% for his career, 7.2% walk rate. Again, a 302 hitter, 355 on base, 487 slugging. And that's the thing I'll say. Nimmo gets on base more, but Turner's hit for a higher average. And when you have a good team, having those hits is important to drive in the runs. I think Turner's a better run producer, and I do believe if the Mets were to make this move offensively, you could either lead off Trea Turner, or you could go with Trea Turner batting in the 2-hole with Jeff McNeil leading off. You could lead off Starling Marte with Trea Turner in the 2-hole. That's a lot of speed, too, with Turner and Marte on the base pass. Gotta love that. You could space out your lineup. You could have Turner hit 5th if you want to and go with the same front four you had. Well, not the same because Nimmo's not there, but McNeil and Nimmo slot, Marte, Lindor, Alonso. There's a lot of ways the Mets can structure that lineup. But the bottom line here is this is a guy that can go out and that can hit, over 20 home runs. He had 28 in 2021, 21 this past year. Has driven in 100 runs this past season for the first time. Scored over 100 each of the last 2 years. I mean, he's just a dynamic offensive weapon and one that the Mets really don't have. I mean, the combination of speed, hitting for average, for some pop too. He's a 5-tool player, and I think the defense is the big question mark, and also the contract is a huge question mark to me, and I don't know if that is necessarily the best allocation of resources, because I do think it's a little bit clunky in a couple of different ways that we'll get into, but I'm telling you, I'd be thrilled about it if they do it. How could you not be thrilled about getting a perennial all-star that, based on Fangraphs wins above replacement since 2019, I believe he's the second best player in baseball. Let me look at that and confirm. I think that was something that I heard in the hype video with Jon Hamm narrating there. Since 2019, yes, he is second behind only Aaron Judge. 2 players in baseball that have accumulated an F4 over 20, so over 20 wins added to their teams since 2019. It's Judge and Turner. Judge is at 22.3. He did half of that this year. I mean, you can make the case. Let's look at 2019 to 2021. I would assume then, across that 3-year span, he was the best player. Oh no, Juan Soto, former teammate, a little bit ahead of him. So obviously Soto's numbers took a tank this past year, which pulled him out of it. But again, consistently over the last couple of years, a top 5 player in all of baseball. This year his season F4 came out to 6.3. Nimmo was great, but a 5.4 F4 in his one healthy season. So I think Trea Turner, based on durability and based on production, is a better bet long term. The question is he $100 better? Or $100? Yeah, I'm sure he's $100 better than Nimmo. Is he $100 million better than Brandon Nimmo, though? If that is the difference in contract over a 7-year deal, that's a bigger question. And also, how does he fit on this team? That's another massive question. I'll get into both of those in just a minute. But before we do, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your football betting info this season. Find out the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way. Check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today at betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now let's get into Trea Turner's positional fit on the Mets. This is where this conversation gets a little bit complicated. You could throw him in center. That is certainly a possibility. He did play a little bit of center early on in his career. I believe it was his second season. Wasn't bad out there. Was worth 2 outs above average, but -2 defensive run save. Ultimate zone rating, didn't like him in the outfield either. He was moved into the infield. That's where he has stayed. I think if they got Trea Turner, the idea would be move Jeff McNeil to right, move Starling Marte to center, and have Trea Turner play second base. That's what I think would make sense. Now, would he get some time in center with McNeil over at second? That's a possibility. But what I will say is with the shifting that is happening, or the lack of shifting, I should say, with Major League Baseball banning it, Trea Turner's range, a shortstop's range at second base would be nice. Now, Jeff McNeil, I think, has fantastic range himself. I think it's a big advantage for the Mets going into next season. If they don't add Turner and it's a middle infield of Lindor and McNeil, I think the Mets are more than set. And really, I think that's two guys that can win a Gold Glove next season up the middle. With that said, though, I think Trea Turner is probably just as good as Jeff McNeil at second base. At shortstop, I'd say he's, depending on what metric you look at, he's maybe slightly above average or more closer to just like a league average shortstop. I know John Hamm in the hype video said, amazing franchise shortstop. We'll see. And down the stretch in the playoffs, he did look a little bit shaky at the position. But you move him to second base, where his arm plays up even more, where that range plays up even more. I mean, he would be a fantastic second baseman. Again, would I say he's definitely better than Jeff McNeil? I'm not sure, but it's a shortstop playing the position. I imagine it'd be pretty dang close. And then you just have to worry about the outfield defense. Then you're putting a lot on Starling Marte to have to play center field. McNeil in right field, I think he'll be fine, but the arm is definitely weaker than what you have in Marte. I think McNeil makes up for his lack of arm with his good IQ, hitting the cutoff man, keeping those throws on the line. I still think it could work, but defensively, I do think that the Mets take a step back from Nimmo to Turner, because even if you put Trea Turner in center field, and it's the exact same team as you had this year defensively, except Turner instead of Nimmo, you can't tell me that Trea Turner is just going to once again pick up the position and be better than Brandon Nimmo was, a natural outfielder who worked his butt off over the last couple of years to really turn his defense around. You will take a step back defensively, I think, one way or the other. But if it's the alternative of losing Nimmo and signing Conforto or signing Jock Peterson or pretty much anybody not named Aaron Judge, defensively, you're pretty much going to take a step back, or you're going to get a defensive first center fielder where you won't take a step back and you're going to take a massive step back offensively. So there's just not a lot of great options at this point when it comes to replacing Brandon Nimmo. Trea Turner is one where, the defense at second base, I think, would be really good with him there. And I think that the outfield fit, obviously with McNeil in the outfield, you're taking a little bit of a step back, but I think you'd be okay. And you also could always pivot. In the middle of the season, if Mark Canha's not having a good year and you like what you've gotten from Turner, I mean, you could move McNeil into the left. You could make Canha a bench player. You can go out and acquire a center fielder at the deadline that's more defensive oriented. That's a possibility. So there's a lot of different ways the Mets could swing it. I will say, though, when it comes to moving these guys around, there was a very clear point that Buck Showalter made when it comes to Starling Marte, that he is a guy that likes to be in one spot in the lineup and one spot in the field. So I do believe the Mets have to decide, is he a center fielder or is he a right fielder? And I think signing Trea Turner would make him a center fielder. And I do believe that would be okay. But I think also if they are going to play Marte in center, it's even more of a need to get him off his feet a little bit, to get him some games at DH maybe, to rest him a bit. And that puts more pressure on trying to get, whether it's a Jake Mangum breaking out as a fourth outfielder, whether it's acquiring a fourth outfielder. I think you would still need somebody else that can start some games in center. Theoretically, it could be Trea Turner with, Louis Guillorme playing second with Jeff McNeil and right on those days where when Marte's not playing. But there's just a lot that would go into it. The bottom line, though, when we look at the position players that are available in free agency this offseason, Trea Turner is the second best player behind Judge. So when it comes to that and then upgrading this team, yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better free agent to sign than Trea Turner. And guess what? It's all good problems to have. You figure out how the talent fits together once you acquire the talent. Talent comes first, and there's just few guys in baseball that are more talented than Trea Turner. He's been on winning teams. He's a really good guy, it seems like, from every interview you see of him. I think he'd fit into this clubhouse like a glove. And as much as I think the fit is clunky, if you remove the money element of it, it's hard for me to actually look into a camera and say, yeah, the Mets aren't going to get better if they go from Brandon Nimmo to Trea Turner. This would certainly be an upgrade. It would. It's just a matter of how the pieces come together, and also a matter of how much money is it going to cost, and does signing Trea Turner prohibit you from retaining Jacob deGrom, from doing other things you need to do to build out your ball club? But that's what we'll discuss next after a quick word from our sponsors. How much money will Trea Turner get in free agency? Well, the low end is the Marcus Semien contract, and I think he'll blow through that, but let's just address what that low end would be. Last year, Marcus Semien, $25 million a year over 7 years. That is the baseline, lowest that Trea Turner is going to sign for, but he is a way better player than Semien, or at least a better one, with a longer sample size of success, who's younger, I believe, than Semien was. 29 years old. I think a 7-year deal is certainly still realistic for Trea Turner, and I think he can get over $30 million for the AAV. So now you're talking about, in the 200s for sure over 7 years. 210 would be, $30 million. And every, possibility is closer to 250 over 7, which would be, what was that? Around 250. I think it's a little over 31 and change, right? That would be to 250 would be over 8 years would be over 31 and change. It would be 35.7 would be the AAV. So maybe not quite 250. Maybe you're looking at, 230. Regardless, I do believe it climbs over $30 million a year. And I also believe that he gets 7 years. So that's a big, big financial commitment. Now the question is, what's Brandon Nimmo going to get? I've been saying 24. And it was 6 for 144 was what I had him signing to the Rockies in my free agent profile of Brandon Nimmo. So if that's the case, if you're talking about, 6 for 144, and let's just say, 240 over 7 for Turner. So you're getting about $100 million more with one additional year of control compared to what you'd be signing with Nimmo. But then the durability is the other question mark, and all the other stuff kind of goes away. I think that Steve Cohen is not the type to run back a team that didn't win the World Series, especially until the Mets finally win one with him at the helm. There is that pressure to win, and I don't think he looks at Brandon Nimmo and says he's the problem. But I think that's the one area that they can improve their team right now. The one area they can address is letting him walk. And I think because of the injury history and just that concern about whether he can continue to stay healthy like he did this one season, and also the lack of power he brings and the fact that the speed that he has, he doesn't utilize it on the base pass. So, yeah, he'll walking at the first base, but he needs a double to drive him in, where Trea Turner can steal second and get driven in on a single. I think that's where the Mets are seeing this value, and I like it. I like where their thought process is. The only thing that concerns me then is just what happens with deGrom. How are you building out this rotation? But if Steve Cohen is of the mindset that he just does not care this offseason, that he is just going to spill money in every single direction, then yeah, shop at the top of the market. You got the best closer available. Check. You don't want to get Aaron Judge because you don't want to get in the Yankees' way. That was a recent report that they want to maintain a healthy relationship with Hal Steinbrenner and everything else. By all means, okay. The next best player is Trea Turner. The best free agent starting pitcher is your own guy, Jacob deGrom. Beyond that, are they going to get nuts and get deGrom and get Trea Turner and then still be in the market for Carlos Rodon because he is just saying $400 million? I don't think that's realistic, but I didn't think Max Scherzer was realistic last offseason, so I am done imagining or saying what can happen, because anything can happen when Steve Cohen is the owner of the New York Mets. But right now, what it seems like is they got the one free agent that they had that they couldn't afford to lose in Diaz. Whether it's DeGrom or Rodon or Verlander, I imagine one of those guys in a Mets uniform next year. And then if they sign Trea Turner on top of that, you're just filling out your depth everywhere else. Maybe you trade for another starting pitcher for the top of your rotation. Then you got to build a bullpen through free agency and all these other things that have to be done. But the prospect of Trea Turner in a Mets uniform has to be thrilling for Mets fans. But throughout the week, we will continue to keep you updated on all of the news. There's decisions that still have to be made on Carlos Carrasco. There's the qualifying offer decisions that have to be made. And there, I'm sure, going to be a lot of news throughout the week and beyond. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, @LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going around across all the sports, with instant game reactions, breaking news, the take of the day, and more. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, on YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.